So, in the beginning of the year, I started reading books with one of my best friends, and we started to really go through, books and slowly read them and analyze them. Um, we were reading through some Robert Greene books, and we even went through Kobe Bryant's book for Mamba Mentality, and we just wanted to start the new year by, I don't know, sharing conversations, philosophies, as we perused these books that we read and went through. And while we, were reading, something kind of extraordinary happened. We actually started to make changes in our lifestyle. We started taking notes. We started to develop as people. And, it was a very valuable, extremely valuable experience. As of now, I'm not really able to meet up with my friend as often. We used to do this every morning from 10 to 12, and it was actually really, really fun. It was really enlightening. We got into topics such as, you know, kind of the political climate as of now. We also talked about other things such as business. He decided to try his hand in the stock market because of the recent, this is in 2021 by the way, the recent events with GameStop, and upon, him entering the world of the stock market, we actually discussed the topic of, well, what makes good judgment. If he was going to join, or if he was going to start, putting his money in the stock market, he wanted to make good judgment. And so, what better thing to do than actually go to Google and say, okay, is there anything that kind of talks about how to make good judgment, how to make better judgments? And that's how I came across the TED Talk of Julia Galef from, I believe, 2016 or so. And I watched it, and she mentioned something called Scout Mindset. So this was earlier in the year, I think about 2 or 3 months ago. And it really fascinated me. This was kind of the thing that me and my best friend were kind of, we were talking about already. This idea of like, okay, well, what is the right way to think about things? You're presented with new information, whether it be from books, podcasts, videos. How do you process that? And what actually, how can you better your judgment? And I think what's interesting about it is that it really kind of like made me think about things, how I make decisions, what I kind of, how I assess information, and whether I kind of call it like baloney, I guess you could say, or if I actually accept it, right? So, yeah, so that's what kind of like brought me to this book. And what I'm going to be doing, it's been a while since I've uploaded. If you look at my profile, there are like jumps in time where like, oh, I uploaded like 5 years ago, or maybe like 10 years ago, or whatever. But this is something that I do want to record and go into a deep analysis of this book. What I'm going to be doing is I'll be reading through the book. While I'm reading it, I'll pause while I'm reading it, and then when I come across a point, what I will do is I'll just expound on it. I'll maybe make a reference to what was said, and then I'll put my thoughts out on it. And I want to do this, kind of like chapter by chapter, and go on kind of like on a slow, kind of like, but very thorough kind of analysis on this book. So it's very meta, I guess, because this book is about kind of making better judgment calls, understanding, when to recognize what you're doing or how you're acting is based on a bias that may be false, So that's kind of like, that's what I'm gonna try to kind of like go through, analyze things, like throw in my own opinions, stuff like that. I think it'll be very interesting. It'll be a great thought exercise. And for anybody who is out there, hopefully it'll help you guys out too. Okay, cool. So I'm going to start with the introduction. So, reading now. Alright, so I just finished the first two paragraphs, and I already have some interesting kind of like things to say about it. Like, what's interesting, I haven't really thought about this much, but so Julia comes up with a word, or she's given a word to a trait, and she calls it scout mindset. And what it is like, it's the motivation to see things as they are, not as you wish they were. And this is such an interesting idea because it seems like such a, it seems like something that should already be out there, but it's not. I'm sure that she's probably researched to see, like, is there a word that actually defines this concept that I'm getting at, and it probably didn't exist. And it baffles me that this is something that seems very kind of elementary, like this idea, this thought. It's not very complex, but yet the English language still doesn't have a term for it yet, and it's 2021. So it's very interesting to me. But that it also begs the question, like, how do you, if you do create a term, when, to what point does it actually become one that really becomes recognized, that's put into the dictionary, right? Makes me really think, like, right now this might be like the beginning of the is this the advent of this idea, like, coming out, but when will it actually become something that is recognized and people will start using it? I guess it may be dependent on how popular this thought or this idea kind of gets out there, but that's something that I'm really interested in. Or do you have to, like, submit it to a specific, like, Merriam-Webster's dictionary kind of like site or whatever, to get it, like, officially publicized or whatnot? That's interesting. Also, so for the first paragraph, she mentions this idea of that there's a lot of great traits of people with excellent judgment. And she mentions intelligence, cleverness, courage, and patience. She mentions that all these are good, but there is something that's, that's that goes beyond that, and that's what scout mindset is. The motivation to see things as they are, not as you wish they were to be. So that's interesting. Overlooked. Usually overlooked. The motivation to see things as they are, not as you wish they were. Okay. Interesting. Alright, I'll keep going. This is actually pretty cool. There's this quote by Richard Feynman. The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. Gosh, that really makes me think about when you find out you're dreaming, when you realize you're in a dream, because your subconscious mind, it gives you this kind of like plethora of like information, and you think that it's real, but it's not. It's a dream, and then you figure it out by, in a way, using the Inception method. You roll your totem or your dice or whatever, and you're like, wait a second, this isn't a dream. Oh shoot! I mean, sorry, this isn't real. This is a dream, and it's a really freaky experience. So that's interesting. Okay, cool. You are the easiest person to fool. So it's kind of like being aware of that. It's kind of like breaking out of the matrix, and I do believe that. I think that people think the reality is so grounded, that it's hard for them to shake off the fact that maybe some of the things that they really, really believed aren't true. Cool. So this is an interesting idea, is that we rationalize away our flaws and mistakes. We kind of, in a way, we cherry pick information that is fed to us, and we only take what is, useful or convenient for our own self-interest and purposes, or things that support our tribe. Yeah, no, this is definitely something that I see happening everywhere. There's a term called selective hearing, right? And I think that it's the same thing with information. It's the same thing with even our memory. I teach Japanese, and it's funny because a lot of people think they have bad memories, and that's why they can't learn a language. But the truth of it is that our memories are actually really good. We can remember things from 15 years ago, 20 years ago, very obscure things, very small things. The thing is that it's not that our memory's bad, it's that we have selective memory. Like, our memories are very picky. We only remember things that are super relevant to us, or we think we're going to need in the future. So I think that's what's really, I don't know, that's how it is. And based on the information that we have had previously, that contributes to our self-interest, to our survival, or whatever, that's what determines what kind of passes through the sieve or the filter of information that we retain or that we keep. So yeah, I think memory is very selective, and I think that on that note, yeah, like, information that we do obtain, we also put it through a sieve, another filter, if you will, to kind of like, and we judge, oh, is this actually, like, does this fit with what I believe, or does this work to my interests? And if it doesn't, we kind of push it aside. But maybe that information that we've pushed aside, maybe it's really useful, but we just didn't know it back then. So it's interesting, and that's why I think making very good judgment calls, it's really important. I think it's important in order to have a happy life, in order to have a peaceful life, and in order to kind of really flourish. Quick kind of side note, for me, I feel like a lot of my success and a lot of my happiness are things that I can attribute from making very good judgment calls when the time it called for it. And to be able to continue that or to refine that is extremely, extremely important, I think. More on that later, but let's keep going. And the next paragraph that I read kind of verified why I wanted to read this book in the first place. What's great about it is the idea that, there are times in life where we have made really good judgment calls. And it's about learning from those moments, those points in life where we're like, you know what, that was a really good idea. And understanding the science behind it, and understanding, okay, so why was that so good? How can I replicate that? How can I, capitalize on, the knowledge that I know now of what made that a good decision, so I can make future decisions really good. Awesome. Oh, great. So, the next part, kind of talks about her personal journey starting from 2009, which is great because 2009, I kind of have a similar kind of story as well. So for her, she thought that, helping people to reason, would help answer a lot of questions or solve a lot of problems. If people could only reason better, that'd be great. But she kind of finds out later that there's more to it than meets the eye, kind of thing. My story is kind of similar. 2009 is when I dropped out of Berkeley, and I decided to kind of become more of an entrepreneur. And what's interesting is that in the beginning, for me, I also, thought, oh, my passion is to teach Japanese to people. But oh my gosh, it developed way into something way different. I'm still teaching people Japanese, but it's a very specific. There's a very specific topic that I really just, I don't know, um, really dove into and went really really deep into that one topic that I believe is the linchpin for learning the language really effectively. But anyways, so um, that's interesting. Usually, what you kind of like think is the answer or the problem, the question you have to solve, you're right on a general level, but there's something deeper to it, something way more beyond what you could have imagined in the beginning. So I see that's what uh, you know she went through here. Now this next section is probably this is something that's I think extremely powerful. Um, there's this idea that you know your judgment isn't limited by knowledge nearly as much as it's limited by attitude. And that, I think, is extremely powerful because I think when a lot of people want to to gain judgment or wisdom, right? They actually they look up more knowledge, and that's and sometimes you can read many books, and the books actually will help. Like I've there was a time where I kind of went through a book every day for quite a while. Um, but it's funny because like after I think I hit 100 books after 100 days or something around there. It's on my Facebook. I can check later. But I was like every day that I finished a book, I would put it up on Facebook. I'll be honest, some of them were like through audiobooks, but no, I would go through a book, every day, and it was interesting because you get a lot of ideas from books. In the book Limitless by Jim Quick, he actually mentions that one good thing about reading books is that it gives you insight into other people's minds, and when you have insight from other people or when you read what somebody writes, it's like you're kind of like transcribing their soul in your heart when you're reading things. So you get like a piece of them, and now they're like you take whatever you can glean from that, and it kind of you absorb that and it becomes a part of you. And that's what's so powerful about reading is that you're able to assimilate what information various people have in encountered, what people have experienced, and you kind of make it your own. So one really fun thing that happened with me is I read the it was an autobiography by the tennis player that was number one for a while. I forget his name, and I don't want to botch it. I don't want to dishonor that person. He's super cool. But basically, he was writing about his experience fighting or going up against the number one tennis player at the time, Nadal, and he was kind of. By the way, the airplanes are because I live near an airport, but he was mentioning how when he fought or when he went up against him, there's all these small little details that he remembered that he put into his autobiography, and I felt like I was the one who was going up against Nadal, and I was like, wow, like that's weird how you can read something and you can really put yourself in that situation, even though somebody else lived through that. And now I feel like I'm going up against it all, and now I feel like I've got that experience, under my belt. Even though I haven't. um, by simulating it through reading it in a book, it kind of gives you that memory in a weird way. I think it's kind of the same as when people say that the mind cannot differentiate between fiction and reality, which is why when we do dream, like it's very realistic. So sometimes image training, imagery, or sorry, vision training, I think it's called, is actually effective. And basketball players who have vision trained actually improve their free throw shots, even though they physically did not pick up a ball. So it's very interesting. Anyways, very interesting. So yeah, no, the idea of judgment isn't limited by knowledge, it's by attitude. Going back to that is that you can read and you can assimilate a lot of things through books, and you can live many lives, you can, you can get things. But this kind of reminds me of something that Les Brown said, which was, if success were easy, and if success could be explained, and people could just get it by you explaining it, then everybody would be healthy, fit, and wealthy. Healthy and fit are the same. But healthy, rich, and would have great relationships, with, maybe their family or friends or whatnot. Because knowing something is different than doing something. Or there's a difference from being aware of information and actually truly understanding it, and applying it, I think is really important. I feel like sometimes the only way that you can truly learn a lesson completely is by going through some sort of life experience that makes you truly appreciate, a certain, it can be anything, a simple fact of life, I guess I'd like to call it. You'd have to really experience it, and then when someone tells you something, or then when you hear a certain phrase, you're like, oh, I get it. And here's why this particular note really kind of resonates with me. Our judgment isn't limited by knowledge nearly as much as it's limited by attitude. I really think that how people attitude, the way I look at attitude is that attitude is how you filter your processes of how you filter, the world around you, and then what you do, what you're it's like how you color that information, and what you do with it. It's almost like, and if we're talking about the topic of coloring, it's almost like you see an amazing picture, but it's black and white. Just because you color that picture, it doesn't mean that it's going to turn out to be a masterpiece. It may be a masterpiece already as a black and white picture. But if you really understand, you dig into it, you go into the grooves of what that masterpiece is, and you really bring out, the subtle nuances and the colors from that masterpiece, and then you color it. When you color it, it becomes like spectacular, like super amazing. I say this because I'll read comic books, or I'll see things that have been adapted from black and white picture to like a colored picture, and what people can do by coloring, a black and white picture is simply amazing. There are fantastic things that can be done, very nuanced, subtle things, but it's kind of like how you process that information. So yes, I believe that you get that knowledge, Like, even in this kind of like project that I'm doing, I'm reading a book, and it is a book. But it's like, okay, so what's my attitude towards reading this book? How am I looking at it? What does it kind of stir up inside me when I read it? Like, how do I process it? That's what's important. Reading this book by itself isn't really going to do anything if I just, deadpan read it and just go, okay, I have to finish this for class. I gotta just read every single word. I have to interpret it. You actually gotta dig deep and ask, like, okay, what's the value behind this? And I think attitude is extremely important. It's really how you color, how you color your coloring book, I guess, in a weird way, and making it really good. Putting your own flair to it, taking in personal experiences that, maybe other people have given to you from their books, and then color it with that too. Like Pablo Picasso says, good artists mimic, great artists steal. So it's kind of like that. So it's interesting. Okay, so in the next part here, we are introduced to 3 prongs, and I'm just gonna go over my thoughts after reading about the first prong, which is about the idea that a lot of people, they believe that it's good to have a distorted view on reality, because when you have a distorted view on reality, it can give you confidence that you need in order to start a successful company, or it gives you that, naivety, to do things that will otherwise kind of like, I don't know, that a lot of people would probably not venture to partake in, So I believe that, there's still a strength in, having distorted lens, but does it really help in the long run? And I feel like it's good to. I think there's a sweet spot when it comes to this, because there are times where, like, for example, if I told somebody, well, realistically, it's going to take you maybe about 4 years, to get to maybe like an elementary or middle school level of Japanese, but it'll take you maybe even 10 years or more to talk like a native or whatever. Now, I don't think that's actually true. I think that we can probably like make that a lot. We can cut that in half at least. But what's interesting though is that, the hard reality sometimes is too much for people to swallow. And I really think that it depends on a person specifically. Some people can stomach things, some people can't. But in the long run, is it better for someone to actually know the truth no matter what? I think it'll benefit them. I think overall it benefits people more if they're able to stomach the truth. If they're able to. There are people who are more sensitive than others, so that's my take on it. And for those people who are very sensitive, and maybe that's just in their nature, or maybe they grew up a specific way, I do think it could be a hindrance. But I do think, in the end, knowing the truth, is, if you can stomach it, it is the most rewarding. Because if you know the truth, you don't need to put expectations on yourself that'll disappoint you. And I do think that you can live a happier life when you know what you're in for, and you can accept that, and you can be happy with it, and if you can make peace with it. In terms of starting a business, I think that that's also, an important thing as well. Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, as Julia mentions in this part of her book, they set themselves up so that, it was, they believe they weren't relatively you know, apt to succeed with their companies, but they ended up being the most successful companies. So it kind of does, tell you like, well, in order for them to be as successful as they were, maybe they had to acknowledge all the pitfalls or all the blind spots that they may potentially have going into a business. And I think that that is actually, that is a reason why they are successful. So, awesome. Awesome. So with prong two, Julia basically just mentions that she's going to introduce tools that'll make it easier to see clearly. So great. So some binoculars or some glasses or contact lenses or maybe some eye surgery. But that's great. No, that's awesome. One thing that I thought's interesting is she mentions that, do you find yourself sometimes getting frustrated or angry when you're listening to the other side of an argument? And I think that, yeah, there's something behind that, and I'm really looking forward to seeing like, okay, how can you introspectively kind of like look within yourself, I guess, in a weird way, and be like, okay, am I doing the right thing? Am I running off of, I don't know, biases? Am I being, judgmental because of, something that can be improved within myself? How can I gain further clarity? And I think that's really important. Honestly, I feel like, as an entrepreneur and as somebody who, just somebody who has to make decisions, like important decisions, I think it's really important to have clarity. And I honestly believe, like what I said earlier about with Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, when you have clarity, when you can see the good and the bad with whatever you're doing, then at least you know what you're in for. And if you know what you're in for, then you can get around things that would possibly, really hinder you. It's almost like being aware that you're going to get old and die, and it's like, okay, well, right now, I'm in my 30s, so I'm like, okay, I can kind of expect to be at this point. But then when you look further into the future and you're like, okay, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, like, okay, what can I expect? And then you see people like Wang Deshun, who is like the runway model in China that's like 80 years old, and he looks beautiful, like amazing at 80, physically and everything. It's like, whoa, somebody could be like that? Okay, well, what do I have to watch out for now? Like, what are the pitfalls, So having clarity, being able to understand on a very deep level, like where you are, what you're doing, what maybe to your, the opposite of benefit, what can be against, your self-interest that you think are in your self-interest, stuff like that. So yeah, that's awesome. Clarity. Woo. Awesome. So I'm in the middle of reading the third prong already, which is appreciate the emotional rewards of scout mindset. And I'm already like, oh my gosh, I feel like I can relate already. Being able to have a little bit more clarity in terms of your meta, I guess you can say, like you're being aware of who you are or whatever, it makes you a lot more happy. But I think it's also because of the fact that when you have clarity and you make good judgments, that also does bring about, these same things. It brings about a playful, cheerful, calm, and resolute kind of energy in people, So, interesting. Really interested about this one here. Now, this is really interesting. So, I'm just going by paragraph with this one. And the second paragraph from this section is really interesting because there's a mention here about being constrained by what you're supposed to think, quote unquote, supposed to think, and that there comes freedom or being able to be like, well, hold up, is this something that I'm just supposed to think? Or is this something, like that I can actually do away with. You know, even with the story with this book, you know, um, with this book, I don't plan on agreeing with a lot of things, even though I'm probably predisposed to already agree with a lot of things in terms of like clarity or whatnot. Doesn't mean I don't want to challenge it. What's interesting here is that it's empowering to be able to resist the temptation to self-deceive, and to know that you can face reality even when it's unpleasant. Okay. So, yes, like this is something that obviously, you know, I would agree with. It is empowering to be able to kind of like go against, you know, the norm. Like, for example, coming from an Asian background, you know, there's this, growing up, there was this like belief like, oh, you gotta complete college all the way, and then you gotta, you know, become either a lawyer or a doctor, you know, or something that pays, you know, along those lines, but you have to get your degree. And it's interesting because I kind of was in the middle of, you know, going through college, university. You know, I was pretty good at what I was doing. But then there came a point where I was kind of screwed over because the university system, it was because of tardiness. It's like literally I would have gotten like an A, but because like I was only a few minutes late to class, like every day. And by the way, I had to take a bus, I had to walk, and I had to like go through maybe over an hour of like public transportation in order to go to Berkeley every day. So because I was late a few minutes, and I'm not going to excuse myself completely because, you know, I could have woken up a little bit earlier, but I thought I was being kind of reasonable. Like, okay, well, sometimes the bus is late. You know, sometimes, you know, you can't make it to traffic. But because of that fact alone, I was not able to pass the class, and I was best friends with the person who had the highest grades in class, and we did a lot of projects together, you know, and it kind of baffled me that I was like, wait a second, so just because I was a few minutes late to class, you know, yeah, maybe every day, all of that contributed to me, like, essentially, like, not passing. Now I have to, you know, kind of do another year. It's kind of like, I mean, yeah, I could do that, but it just doesn't make any sense. And also, what does this tell me about the university system? You know, what does this tell me? I don't want to, you know, throw shade too much, but it's interesting because, you know, you get presented with evidence, and then you're like, wait, what if I studied on my own? What's preventing me from getting just as good or not better? And do I need that certificate in order to truly succeed? You know, and when you really think about it, you're like, wait a second, I've been fed a web of lies, and although, you know, I worked hard to get here, I worked hard to get to this point, I spent hours, you know, in school, you know, there's a culture behind all of this, like saying, nope, you gotta follow through. Being able to break out of that, I think, is really important. And because I did break out of it, I am a lot happier because I'm not living a lie. And I think that's the thing that does make people very unhappy, is if they live a lie. They live a lie, you know, they tell themselves they're doing right, everything's good, but it's not. And I feel like it takes a lot of courage to be able to really look inside yourself and be like, okay, now, am I really happy? Is what I'm doing really what's right for me? And then acting on that, or doing what I believe truly, because in one way you can make the argument that, well, it's in your best interest, it's in your best self-interest that you don't find out the truth because it'll be so hard for you and it'll destroy your way of living. Well, again, that depends on the strength of the person. So I believe that, you know, sometimes, and that's not to say that we come at a kind of like set stat where it's like, okay, this is my resistance. It's only 3, so I'm gonna just, you know, I'm just gonna lay here and believe whatever makes me feel happy. I believe, just like with video games or whatever, you can increase your stats by exercising, leveling up, exposing yourself, anti-fragility kind of thing, right? So perhaps someone needs to build up to that first before they can accept the truth. But ultimately, I do believe that when you're not BSing yourself and you're very you're upfront and you face that dragon or whatever, in the end you find out, oh, it's not as bad as I thought it would be. And on top of that, the rewards for temporarily having your world turned upside down far outweigh if you continued living 30, 40, 50, 60 years believing in that lie and never waking up from it. It's like being in a dream that you never wake up from. And the sad part about the dream too is not that it's just a dream, but it's your life. That's your existence. And if you die, and if you have nothing left after you die, what was it in the end? So it's interesting. So, anyways, moving forward. All right, awesome. So, in conclusion, Julia mentions that, she's going to bring up a few cases, and, it's going to kind of make you, think about this topic even more, which is great. She also makes a disclaimer that she's not writing this so that she can point out how irrational people are, but it's more of a way to show these examples so that you can get an understanding of of things, and to appreciate the ability to see clearly, which is scout mindset. And I believe this is something worth talking about. It's worth having a discussion about. It is worth kind of like going through a slow read about, and really kind of like going through it and really processing it and letting it sink in, for what it's worth. I do believe that, in the end of the day, having a clear mind, being able to make better judgment calls, it has way more of an impact on people's lives than they would initially think. And I think this book explores that, and I want to further just like dig into that and see and color, I guess you might say, this book, maybe with my own thoughts and ideas, to maybe, I don't know, maybe help somebody out there who doesn't know about this idea, and maybe to be an advocate or a champion for this idea, that scout mindset is a very valuable thing. And I do believe that it could, being able to sharpen your ability to think like a scout, will help really improve your life, but not in like, I don't want to say it in a cheesy way, like improve your life in all aspects or whatever, but no, like it'll serve you in whatever way you want to live your life. So whether you want to be like super successful and have a lot of money, or I don't know, it could be even success in terms of your career or whatnot. I think, being very real, is so valuable. So with that, I'm going to, end this, this first kind of recording. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I have enjoyed it thoroughly. This is a great book, and I believe, Julia's a great author, and she's, she has some really good points that can really be fleshed out. So, yeah, awesome. So this is the conclusion of, the introduction of this book, which I plan on, going chapter by chapter and putting in my insight. So until next time, have a good one, and yeah, have a great day.